Hi, everyone. This is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, and today I am thrilled to have on the podcast for a special episode my own congressional representative, Congresswoman Robin Kelly. Hello, Congresswoman Kelly.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast to talk to me. So, for our listeners, maybe we could provide some context. I know where the 2nd District of Illinois is, but some of our listeners might not. And I realized as I was looking at a map that, in fact, I didn't have a very good understanding of the 2nd District. So, I live in the sort of tippy top little corner way up in East Hyde Park, sort of surrounded by the 1st District and the lake. And I realized I didn't know how far south the 2nd District goes.
It goes a long way from you. The district is actually urban, suburban, and rural. So I start at 53rd and Cornell and really hug the lake and then go into the south suburbs. So I have most of the suburbs that are east of 57. And then I go into a little bit of Will, and then I have all of Kankakee County. So I often say I have the city slickers, the suburbanites, and the farmers because I have 1,200 farms in my district. It really speaks to Illinois. And I actually like the diversity of the district.
Yeah, that's a lot of different constituencies to represent, though.
And you know you're not going to make everybody happy, but
that's America.
That's right.
And you've been in office in Congress since 2013.
Right. Actually, it'll be 5 years this month. I believe I was sworn in April 11th. I think I won on the 9th and was sworn in on the 11th because it was a special election.
And so could you tell us, just to give listeners a little bit of context to sort of what you were doing before you came to Congress and why you decided to run in this special election and the kinds of things that you work on in Congress?
I've been in government a long time, starting with working as the Community Affairs Director for the Village of Matheson, and I did that for 13 years. And during that time, I was asked to run for state representative. So never thought I would run for office. Always thought I'd be in a public service type of job or helping type of job, as I have a psych and counseling degree, and I do have a PhD in political science, but the psych and counseling come in more handy, actually. I was a state rep, and then after that, I was the chief of staff in the treasurer's office, so I worked for Alexi Janulius. And then I worked for President Tony Prewinkle for 2 years as the chief administrative officer. And when Congressman Jackson, my congressperson, decided to step down after he won, I decided that once again, take a leap of faith and run for his office. So I've been in, government for a long time. I've worked on every level of government, local, state, county, and now federal.
And could you talk a little bit about the committees that you serve on in Congress?
When I started, I served on science, space, and technology, and oversight and government reform. And to be honest, I got off of science, space, and technology because I can't be any clearer. It didn't feel like my colleagues believed in science. I mean, we were still questioning global warming, climate change, and things like that. And frankly, I just couldn't take it anymore. So I moved to foreign affairs. So I'm on foreign affairs and I'm on oversight and government reform. And on oversight, I am the ranking Democrat on the IT subcommittee. And I'm also on the health committee. And with foreign affairs, I'm on emerging threats. So all the things you think about as emerging threats. Then also I'm on Western Hemisphere because very interested in the Caribbean islands and Cuba and South America. I'm on the subcommittee of Western Hemisphere. And then beside committees, I'm the vice chair of the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force. I'm the co-chair of the Democratic Budget Group, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Health Brain Trust, and then was asked to chair, but I found some co-chairs, the Caucus on Black Women and Girls. And actually, that was the only group to this point in Congress that had no caucus or focus specifically on those issues.
I went to an event a year or two ago, I think, that was on the University of Chicago campus that was part of that Congressional Caucus on Black Women and Girls. That was really fascinating. So I think that's such an important thing for there to be a caucus for.
Right. And it's for all kind of things, like where we've, been champions, where, we're losing out, like, equal pay and different things like that, where we're doing well, and how do we continue doing well and what do we need to do? Just the number of things. And actually, being the combination of Black Women and Girls and Health Brain Trust, there are things like maternal mortality that we're working on now because that's such an issue in this country for all women. But, women of color suffer more, particularly Black women, but we don't do so well in the United States, period, with that.
Yeah, and we've been talking in other episodes that we've had about how underrepresented Black women are in Congress and how
Mm-hmm.
increasing that representation can really make sure that those voices are heard and that those issues are really considered.
Definitely. Well, I often say, if you're not at the table, you and your issues are on the menu. And then we always think about Shirley Chisholm, the first Black woman in Congress that said you have to bring your folding chair to the table if they don't have a chair for you. So that's very, very true. And I mean, just period, there's not, when you look at all of Congress, there's not a lot of women better on the Democratic side than the Republican side, and definitely in the Senate, or just in general, when you look at governors and mayors and things like that, there's no Black woman governor, and we're hoping that Stacey in Georgia will be the first.
I also then wanted to talk to you about the Kelly Report for Gun Violence in America
Sure.
that you authored in 2014 and then
Right.
recently did an update to in 2018. So can you talk a little bit about sort of how this came about, what the impetus was for the
Mm-hmm.
2014 report?
Well, when I first announced for Congress, that was one of the things I spoke about, gun violence prevention, gun safety reforms. And then right after, Newtown happened, then Hygeia happened, and then another mass shooting. And then, it seems almost daily in Chicago and other places, somebody was dying one by one by one. So we decided that we would actually do an analysis because there had never really been a congressional analysis. So that's how the Kelly Report on Guns was born. And we really, we went to experts. We wanted it to be solutions oriented and, found out that really suicides are the number one thing, and then homicides, and then accidents. Found out, though, for African Americans, homicide is very prevalent. Suicides, if you're a white male, not degreed, you're 5 times more likely if you own a gun to kill yourself. How many women die because of gun violence through domestic violence? Just a lot of different areas were touched upon, and then some suggestions of what could be done, and through legislation or some conversation around smart guns, some conversation around getting to the root cause of the problems, particularly in urban areas, like, looking at education, job skills, mentoring programs, after school programs. If those things were available, would our young people pick up pens, pencils, books, hobbies, job skills instead of picking up guns, because they would have some hope and they would have opportunity? And then some things were so surprising, like with the consumer protection, that cribs and teddy bears and strollers are on it, but guns were carved out. And, up until we just passed this omnibus bill, the CDC could not do research on guns because of the Dickey Amendment. I mean, absolutely ridiculous. No money could go toward it. There could be no research done. So then that was the excuse used about data. There's no data, but you didn't allow us to have data. So it brought out a myriad of topics.
So there were a number of recommendations that were made in this report, which seemed to be, to me, to be very common sense solutions, things that would be reasonably easy in some cases to implement. But there has been virtually no action on this since the report
Right.
in 2014. Could you talk about, from your position in Congress, what some of the barriers have been to enacting these kinds of legislation?
Well, of course, there's the NRA
Uh-huh.
and their Bigfoot influence on a number of members of Congress. There is Speaker Boehner and Speaker Ryan, who refused to call bills to the floor for us to even vote on, whether you vote them up or down. And these include bipartisan bills, like the background check bill is a bipartisan bill. Peter King from New York, a moderate Republican, and Mike Thompson from California, a big-time gun owner. And right now, there are 204 sponsors. This is the most we've ever had on the bill, and we don't know if the bill still will be called. You only need 218 to pass a vote, and sometimes people don't sign on as co-sponsors because they're sticking their neck out, and if the bill's never going to be called, they figure, why do that? So that, the NRA, it's money, it's influence, big gun lobbies, gun manufacturers, and then the people in charge. And right now, the Republicans are large and in charge. The White House, the Senate, and we are about 25 members down in the House. So it's hard to affect change, but even bipartisan bills are not called, and they're not even listening to their regular everyday NRA members and their regular everyday Americans, because the overwhelming amount of NRA members and Americans want stronger background checks, but they have to be willing, and maybe this is going to come. It happened, in Virginia, where health and gun violence were 1 and 2, and they almost flipped the House around. I mean, what they were able to do was amazing, and that's what's going to have to happen across this country. And it doesn't mean, I always have to say this, I'm not against guns. It doesn't mean we're trying to take your gun away. I mean, that message has really gripped people. They're going to take your guns. No, if you have your gun legally and you're responsible, you're not trying to hurt yourself, me, or anyone else, most people won't mind that you have a gun. There's question around if you need a AR-15 or AK-47, but, if you want to protect your family or go hunting, I don't think people have a problem with that.
So since your district, my district, spans so many different kinds of areas, what are you hearing from constituents, both in sort of the more urban areas in Chicago, but then also, out in the rural areas? Do you hear different sentiments from constituents about guns?
Yeah. I mean, the further south I go, the more people don't exactly see eye to eye. But there are people south and north, that agree with each other. Like I've had people that support me greatly but don't agree with what I'm saying, and they feel like, I think they believe the hype that we're trying to take their gun away, which is not true. But I just had something. I spoke at a church in Park Forest, and about 160 to 180 people came. And there were people that came up to me that said that now they better understand that I'm not trying to take their guns away, but that's the hype that NRA or AMOLand or different people try to put out there, and it's just not true, And so I would say more people, the further south I go in my district, definitely want their guns or may disagree with me. But also, since the Las Vegas shootings and Parkland and some of the others, I've had gun owners come to me and say they're throwing away all their guns. I mean, it just seems like people are getting to a point where, I don't know if they're disgusted, I don't know what the word is, but what I want people also to realize, there are people that die every day. It's not just about the mass shootings. If you count up what happens every day, that passes mass shootings overwhelmingly.
So, you said you went to this meeting and you talked and people came up and understood better. Is there some way we as a society, on an individual basis, on a large scale, can start to have those conversations so that more people are understanding each other?
I think so, but I mean, you have to get, like, one time I was supposed to speak. I can't remember if it was in Will or Kankakee, and I was talking about economic development, and there was a group that was there waiting to protest because I was there, because they thought I was going to talk about guns, but they had been misinformed, So people have to be a little bit willing to be a little open-minded, but, it's amazing to me. Some of the people are so fierce about this, like, you're not taking my gun, and, and that kind of thing. And, the whole Second Amendment rights piece and all of that. But also, I mean, when the Second Amendment was written, I think the circumstances were a little bit different. And if you think about